First of all, I so enjoyed this film. I went into it. It's one of those rare instances where I ended up liking the sequel more than I liked the original, and I enjoyed the original. But one of the things you guys did, and actually, Shannyn, you and I were just talking about this off camera a little bit, is that a lot of times in horror movies, especially in franchise, when they go into a sequel, what they will often try to do is just repeat what they did in the first one. Is there a monster in the bushes? And then the second one, is there a monster in the bushes? Well, we already know there's a monster in the bush. We saw that in the first film.
Right.
And what I loved about this, and I really recognized about 10 minutes in, is that you guys just assumed that your audience is intelligent. We've met Bughuul, we've met the ghost children, we know they're all there, and you take us to the next phase of the story. And I just love that. When you guys were first talking about the film and how this is going to come together, was that like a purposeful decision you guys came up with, or did that just kind of come about organically?
No, that was on the page. I mean, when I first read the script, one of the things that stood out to me was, I sort of read the script the same way that you might have went to see the movie, in that I thought, I'm flattered that I've been asked to consider this, but I bet you this is a quick cash-in sequel where it's just the same story with whoever is the cheaper Ethan Hawke option, and it's just going to be the same story again. And what surprised me was how it sort of expanded upon the mythology by showing you something that presumably was happening off camera in the first movie, which
right.
was how these kids are sort of lured into this whole scheme, how they're ordained to being another kind of foot soldier of Bughuul, how they go from being a regular kid to wanting to make a kill film where they make a movie of their family being killed, so I thought that it did everything that a horror sequel should do. It wasn't repeating the same things. It was a sequel, so that what people loved about the first movie, was still there. Those elements of dread and the kill films and all that kind of stuff was there, but it explored it from a completely new perspective.
Right. Now, talking about the kill films, that's kind of the one thing I know a lot of my friends are talking about after watching the first one. It's like, are they going to have those again? And if they do, how do they top them? And you guys figured out a way to top them. Like, when you're seeing this as an actress, as well as you're reading it on the page, how did that translate differently between, first of all, how horrific was it just to read this stuff on the page? Because that was some incredible stuff, to the difference between that and then seeing it playing out. But I know you haven't watched the full film yet. Yeah, so what was your reaction to it, just seeing it on the page?
I kind of glanced over it pretty quickly, and not because it wasn't my character's lines, which we also do as actors sometimes, but because it was, I'm not a horror film fan. I'm just not. So I kind of like, yeah, okay, some really dark stuff has to go on here. Okay, got that. And what's the next scene? Yeah, and I haven't seen the film yet. I'm really excited to. I'm sure it's going to be. I'm one of those drama queen reactors in the theater, so I'm sure I'm going to be very uncomfortable. And yeah, this is for you. This one.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, one of the in choosing an actress to play Courtney, the fact that Shannyn is not a horror movie fan was a big attraction for me. Because I think that these films, all of my favorite horror films, and it's something that's not done enough, but all my favorite horror films, the drama is treated with a level of authenticity that you don't normally find in a genre film, and when the performances are credible, and when you've got great actors like Shannyn, then you get performances that feel totally real. And so when you're asking an audience to feel the sense of terror or the sense of dread or things to do with the paranormal that don't exist, it just amplifies that feeling for the audience, where they're like, well, these characters feel real, so therefore I'll totally accept what you're asking me to accept. So
well, one of the things you're pointing out is true. It's one of the underlying features of good horror films, are the ones that seem to understand that underneath the horror of it, there has to be a true human story. And for that to work, you have to believe in the human characters. And one of the things that I think really attached me to the film and got me into the movie was your relationship to your sons, D'Artagnan. And I just found out that they're brothers. They're brothers in real life. Mm-hmm. So what was the key for you in making that chemistry work so well on screen? And what was it just like working with the two brothers?
I think because I have a 12-year-old boy and a 3-year-old boy, so that right there was my ticket as far as stakes, you know. But I did want to. I am a different person. Obviously, I'm not running from an abusive relationship, so I did want to create an imaginary world with them. We had a few lunches before we started shooting, and I let them know very quickly that I was fun and that they could make fun of me a lot, and that, you know, and they realized, okay, this is gonna be just fine. At first they were very well behaved, and then, you know, within the first 25 minutes they realized they didn't have to be well behaved with me, and, you know. And on set it was interesting because they were with directing kids, I imagine, is so tricky in a genre film, but mostly it's about casting and it's about their makeup and it's about post, because you don't want the kids to actually be experiencing this kind of terror.
Right.
So it's more just about like, you know, Jack come through the door very, very, very slowly. And he's got the makeup so it's scary, and just make sure you're not smiling. And so they just play pretend kind of innocently. But when I was in the role of Courtney, and especially in the moments of just pure panic, terror, the really, really intense moments, I would have to tell the Robert, who played Dylan, constantly before the take, just so you know, I'm gonna be holding you really tight in this take, because I just would be holding you really tight right now, so you gotta let me, you know. And because I always felt from him that he was a little irritated that I was holding him so tightly. Because it's probably annoying to be kind of manhandled like that, but
and they never acted. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
and they.
the
Oh
thing,
wow, that's really interesting.
You know, so it was brand new to these guys, because the script called for identical twins. You know?
Oh really?
Yeah, and I knew that we wouldn't have. You know, that's like, if you had a year of searching, you know, maybe you might come up with two identical twins who are amazing. But I knew we wouldn't have, you know, the time to use the one good kid actor that you find to put him in two different costumes and shoot him.
Right.
You know, I knew we wouldn't have the time to do that, and I knew we wouldn't have the budget to do like a Army Hammer and Social Network type of thing, where you just, you know, digitally sort of put his head on another character. So finding twins was a task that I just found incredibly daunting. But, you know, we actually found those guys in the second week. Of looking, yeah, and we found them out of you know, I'd asked Terry Taylor, the casting director, who did an amazing job, to look in places that you might not normally look in for kids, because, you know, one thing that came out of my first movie, Citadel, was, you know, I found most of my kids out of a local martial arts school, you know, and because I'm always wary when, like, you know, a 10-year-old has a manager. You know, it's like, you know, or you know, it's like, you know, or their parents wanted them to be actors before they were conceived, you know, and so you know, what the sports background does is it gives you what a lot of 10-year-olds lack, I guess, which is a sense of focus and discipline and all those kind of things. But you get kids that feel like kids,
right?
You know, they have a rawness to them and a reality to them that you don't get with the overly theatrical. So they hadn't been on a movie set before, you know.
That's
so
wild.
Yeah, so it was also, I guess, you know, sort of to them it is all make believe, but, you know, when an actor really wants to feel the emotion of a scene, they've got to go there. So that was kind of like, what's wrong with Shannyn all of a sudden?
Yeah.
So, you know. But,
and unfortunately, it bothered Robert, who played Dylan, the one I was supposed to have most connection with, more than it bothered D'Artagnan, who was playing Zach. And so I was like I said, I was just constantly, and it was fine. I had so much fun with those boys. They're so sweet. But I was constantly saying, okay, just so you know, it's going to get a little weird. Because in the beginning, I did feel like I was weirding them out. I felt that they were uncomfortable around their mother.
Right.
And that's not good. So, yeah.
Well, listen, we asked our fans on our social media if you guys had any questions for our guests, and you sent in a ton. We're going to take a couple right now. So let's get to the first Twitter question. The first Twitter question came from Carlos, and he was asking, what are some challenges of taking over a property established by another director?
Well, I think one of the attractions of my first movie for Scott, one of the things that led him to me was the fact that I think, we're not a million miles away in terms of our aesthetics or, our tastes.
Right.
So I think he felt confident that, in looking at my first movie that, in stepping into the sequel to this franchise that he created, that it was in good hands. So the only, I felt a little bit of trepidation with regards to things that felt iconic to the first movie, like the kill films, and so I wanted to get them right, But it was a different beast on the page. It wasn't, like I say, it wasn't a retread of the first movie. It was its own story. So his advice to me was, this is your movie, and run with it. And so so I felt initially quite nervous about it, but as soon as I moved over to the US and met Scott, met the team, that anxiety went away.
All right, let's go to our next one. And the next one we have up comes from Kevin, who's asking, was there any point in shooting the movie that you were genuinely creeped out? Did any part of the film legitimately creep you out as you were shooting?
When I got bitten by a brown recluse, that freaked me out. Yeah. I was bitten by this spider that I'd never heard of, and it's necrosis. So it's like a real life zombie virus that if it gets into your bloodstream or the bone, you can lose your leg.
Oh
wow!
So I was taken to hospital that night, and I had no idea what it was. I just couldn't move my leg, and I was more kind of I was more annoyed that I was missing the final shot that we were shooting. And then when I got to the hospital, they said, there's a brown recluse. We need to hook you up to an IV drip. And
what I love about that story is that because Ciaran's my favorite kind of director. He doesn't sit behind Video Village.
Right.
He's there with you, and it's just it's a great feeling. But the first time he decides to sit in his director's chair, that's when he got bit.
Yeah.
Oh no, really?
Yeah. So basically, that spider was sitting in the director's chair. He was directing the movie, but I didn't see him. But coincidentally, it was the same day that we had that a real wolf spider on set for that scene with Dylan.
Oh, right, where with the slingshot.
Yeah, and that's a big spider, and he had 3 wranglers, and he was like the biggest diva on set because he had he came in this kind of box with all this kind of cotton wool and stuff inside, and they can't force him out. He'll come out when he comes out.
Right.
So on a movie like this, you're against the clock the entire time, and you have 30 days to shoot it, and you're kind of watching your watch and going, is he coming out? Is he coming out? You're like, he's not coming out yet. And you're just waiting, and then finally, the kind of the
diva entrance.
The diva entrance, and just walks and does it. You finished and goes back into its thing. But coincidentally, it was that night, and I assumed it was that spider that got out.
That would be funny,
but it wasn't.
All right, last question we're going to take from our audience, and this one comes from Travis. And Travis says, for Shannyn, which movie, genre, or role have you not appeared in that you would really love to take a try at?
I think a musical.
Oh, wow.
Or a comedy. Yeah, I got asked a lot today that, you seem, a lot of people said you seem to be drawn to horror, genre films. And I was like, oh, no. They just come to me. But I would, I'd like to branch out of that. Obviously, it's just more fun. I love to laugh, and I have a lot of lighter sides as well. So anything that explores that. I used to be a dancer. I love to dance. So I'd like to do that before I'm, 50.
Right. I think it's a little more difficult.
But the funny thing about making a horror film is there's a lot of laughing on set.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And there sort of has to be,
right.
Because, well, I think so anyway, because I don't know, I've been on quite a few film sets, even watching colleagues direct, and it seems like the pervading atmosphere, you'd know more of this than I would, it seems like the pervading atmosphere on set is almost the antithesis of what the movie is about. And it's like the more lighter the movie, the more so everyone's just like, this, but on a horror film, I don't know, my 2 experiences so far, there's been a lot of a lot of laughing because it's Halloween for grown-ups.
Well, listen, guys. I find in my personal experience that when you have movies that are more intimate, very few sets, very few performers, that's when the onus really gets put on the director as a storyteller and on the cast and their acting to carry that movie. And I was thoroughly entertained watching this film. So congratulations on the film, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.